we need to operate differently to be able to generate asymmetric upside. Anyone who expects to come in and like play a known role with an existing playbook, like by definition almost, is like probably not going to be a good fit. Personally, for Airtable, like I think we do have to radically refound the company and break a lot of the current way of working in order to win, right? Like we do have an existing distribution base. We do have these no-code components. It'd be really hard to go and like build those from scratch. The wrong approach would be to say like, okay, let's just take our existing product, our existing business, and slap some AI on top of it. And frankly, I think a lot of the really large incumbents are effectively doing that. I think when you're a first-time founder, like I had no experience, I didn't have wisdom, I didn't have like, credibility. So all I had was sweat.
Welcome to Grit. I'm Joubin, partner at Kleiner Perkins, a show where we go beyond the highlight reel and explore the personal and professional challenges of building history-making companies. Today on Grit, we have Howie Liu, co-founder and CEO of Airtable, the now AI-native platform trusted by over 500,000 organizations globally to build powerful apps without writing code. They're at a very interesting time in their business, as many incumbents are, grappling with what this transformation of technology actually means for them. Howie reflects on Airtable's evolution into a foundational tool for modern work. We talk about what it's like to build AI-native companies today versus what it was like for him 10 plus years ago. Enjoy the episode. When you started your first company, you were how old?
20 or like maybe just had turned 21.
21.
Yeah.
And that was like 15 years ago?
Yeah, 2009 I graduated and then right away pretty much applied to YC with a college friend of mine. And then we got in for that winter's batch. So it started in like whatever, January of 2010.
Okay. And then you raise a seed?
Small seed. I mean, seed at that time was like $700K. And we were pretty proud of like, oh man, we raised a real round. We had a $4 million cap on our note.
Yeah.
And for the time, that was like pretty decent as a seed round.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, the whole thing was very scrappy. Like, it was two people. We built a product. We launched it.
No fancy execs.
No fancy execs. Like, we only ever got to like 4 people total. So we hired 2 additional people for that company. And then we basically went into an acqui-hire process, and Salesforce was the winner that picked us up.
What does an acqui-hire process mean?
It means
you were over it and you wanted to sell the company?
Well, not so much that like we were fully over it. Like I actually still had optimism about our prospects as a company. I think we were in a really interesting space. Like we were one of the early pioneers of like, innovation on email, right? So our first product was basically an extension that would plug into Gmail and show you this overlay sidebar. Like we literally hacked the DOM. We were like, I think the first to actually figure out how to reverse engineer, like injecting our own UI on top of the Gmail UI. Reportive and other products would later do it as well. But on top of that, we also had like a standalone CRM product where like we would suck in your emails, your phone calls, et cetera, and like show you this kind of evergreen Rolodex, right? Like here's all the people you talked to recently. And so, I still had conviction that like there was a there in that space. And I still do. Like, I think there's like a lot of value to be created, especially now in the agentic era, around like rethinking what email and relationship management workflows look like, especially for the individual. But it was kind of this moment where, one, like, I think, we had the humility to acknowledge, like, we don't know, like, the playbook to build this into a big business, right? And, like, one path to get there is to just, like, trial and error, do it as an independent company. But another path is like, we had a lot of suitors knocking. I think we had demonstrated as a very small team the ability to build high quality product. Like, we did a single page app, like we did the Chrome extension thing. Like these were things that were like not really that well established at the time. Like this was long before like React or even Backbone, like these front end frameworks that made it easy. So we kind of like showed we could build high quality product very quickly. And we had a number of different bigger companies like knocking on our doors. And, I think it was a moment where like the temptation to say, okay, well, like we're scrapping it out. We're eating burritos every night. We're sleeping on airbeds in the office like every night. And like, we don't really know what the path to get to like success is, even though there is still a potential path. And then on the other hand, like maybe we go take an exit. Like, we can basically, learn a lot wherever we go. And then the next thing we each do can be a lot more, forethought.
That makes sense. Did you make good money?
Good for the time. I mean, look, I grew up in a very, very financially modest family. My parents were both first generation immigrants, so they came here, with very little in their pockets.
From where?
So I'm actually Korean, but my parents grew up in China. So my grandparents moved to China from Korea, and then my parents were born in China, and then they moved to the States. So I was born in actually Texas, and so, they were like very modest. We had a very modest family growing up. And so, basically I made like very low 7 figures on day one of this exit, which for me was like this profound, like life-changing event from going, from this scrappy ramen diet and like, basically knowing I couldn't go back and just rely on my family to fund, to pay the bills, to now having enough.
Like a couple $1 million.
Yeah. Like, I mean, enough to like, A, not have to worry about like paying rent in the near future, and B, like feeling like I could have some breathing room to really think about like, okay, what's the next thing I want to do? And it doesn't have to be something I launch in like weeks. I mean, the blessing and the curse of that first company and the YC model was like, we felt like we had to just put something out there in the span of 10 weeks. And I think that's a good thing in some ways, because you have to go just test product market fit. But it's constraining because there are certain types of products, Airtable included. Figma is another one actually that started around the same time and also took, I think, over 2 years before launching.
Yeah.
That just you could not go and like launch overnight. And so I think it afforded me the luxury of being able to go and like, really stew on the next thing for longer.
Yeah. When you were 21 when that happened?
Yeah, I might have turned 22 by the time of the acquisition.
So you go to Salesforce, you make a couple $1 million, you're 22 years old.
Yeah.
You don't come from money.
No.
What do you like, king of the castle at this point? Like, how did you feel? Like, did you feel rich? You must have felt rich.
I mean, in a sense, relative to my own,
that's what I mean.
Kind of modest beginnings for sure. And
I don't think relative to now when your company's worth like $12 billion.
Well, not only that, but I think I also I think at that point, it's kind of like the more you know, the more you realize how little you know, right? And I think in a way, it's like the more money you get, the more you realize, oh, like, I'm actually just like still a tiny, tiny minnow in this broader ocean of like, highly successful people. And financial outcome has never been my primary motivator, but I think just like getting to that exit made me realize like, wow, like, this is still a very small and modest outcome, compared to like the size of scale, that either other entrepreneurs or even just like business people have created. And so, I think mainly my takeaway was like, okay, like I now have the ability to like go big and swing big. It wasn't like like I've got laurels to rest on. Like I feel like the king.
Yeah. Did you get to spend like money on young people things? Like, did you get to do the like, did you like get to do that?
I mean, look, I upgraded like what was a much scrappier apartment with roommates to a nicer apartment still with roommates.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the one nice purchase I made for myself was like a used BMW M6, which, I always love cars and like had a V10 engine.
Yeah,
so that was kind of cool. But it's like, that's not even like a Ferrari. It's not like a crazy car.
Yeah. And probably like within, I would venture to guess like a month, you were like, this feels like any other car I've ever driven.
I actually love that car for like the full 6-7 years. I owned it. I actually gave it to my brother. So like, it's still around in our family. Like he doesn't drive it now, but like, like I don't actually think I want to ever sell that car. Like, I mean, it's like, to me, it's like symbolic of just that moment in time. There's nostalgia to that like feeling I had, and B, I mean, it's a cool car. I think it's a little timeless.
Yeah, it is a cool car.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the company's not public yet, but during the COVID days, you got a giant valuation, like $12 billion.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but I assume you like hopefully took some money off the table, whatever. Like, you've probably experienced a level of wealth that you didn't previously have.
Yeah.
That when you were growing up in Texas, that $2 million felt like, oh man, if one day I could get to the $2 million, like, could you imagine?
Yeah.
Talk, and your parents probably like, I imagine your parents when you made that were like, what the hell? Like, is it? Like,
I mean,
is it serious? Like,
I mean, I think my parents have always, been fairly both understanding of the career path I chose. So like, when I first said, look, I want to do the startup thing, I'm not going to take a normal job, like they didn't freak out. They actually were highly supportive. In fact, like, they were willing to like, help fund, kind of my ramen diet for the first few months of it. Like literally, hey, do you need a check to like pay the bills for a few months to try this out? Even though it's not like they had a big coffer to pull from. And then I think when the first exit happened, I mean, like I think it was a proud moment for all of us. But like, in a way, it's like we didn't over rotate on the finances of it, right? And I think for me and my family, it was more of like, wow, like you got to pursue your dream, which is like to build something from scratch and like, to kind of like create your own company, work for yourself. And like, I think that part was the greater pride that we had. And even like later, to your point, like as Airtable scaled into like a, kind of sizable unicorn, decacorn type of company, I think at every moment, like, my mom will still to this day send me like little clippings of like, here's Airtable mentioned in some like obscure news outlet, right? Like here's like a Chinese news company that like wrote about Airtable and its competition, right? And like, she'll always like send me stuff or like say, oh wow, like good job on this, like interview or whatever. And so it's more of like the journey, I think, that we've like kind of fixated on than like the outcome.
Yeah, but like, do you feel that way on a day-to-day? Like, is your lived reality that like you gotta let go of half the company or like now AI is coming and it's like an existential threat to your business? Like when that happens, are you like, man, I'm really enjoying this journey right now, like I'm decoupled from the outcome?
Look, I mean, I would be lying if I said like the whole way has been like happy times, smooth sailing, like just like loved every single second of it. I mean, look, there were like really rough moments of the journey. Like, I mean, to your point, like riffing, we did 2 riffs that collectively cut the company from effectively 1280 people, which by the way, we like scaled way too rapidly too, from 50 people in like less than 3 years, maybe even like less than 2.5 years. But like had to cut it back down to roughly 600. So that, I mean, that's a big, painful, choice and thing to do, right? And like the knowledge that each of those, 600-ish, roles is a person too that we've impacted, that I've impacted. I mean, that like, those moments are not fun, right? And then, in between, there's also a lot of grind and slog where it's not just like up and to the right. And, just the tough everyday decisions, sometimes like having to let go of individual execs or just dealing with like, business challenges. So I think the journey is, at least in my experience, like a rocky one. And yet you kind of have to like enjoy the hard thing, or else like it's never going to be like perpetually easy. And in fact, like, there have been like stretches where it felt like it was easy and growth just came like, very, naturally to us, right? Like we didn't feel like we had to go out and like fight for growth or do completely new hard things for growth. We just got growth, right? And we got valuation increases and everything was just kind of swimming along, in harmony. And, I always felt like some unease in those moments. And like, maybe at the time, like I would have said, oh, maybe that's just like some like subconscious guilt or like fear of like, this is too easy. But in retrospect, I actually think like
your instinct was right.
My instinct was right, which is like, my mental model for like growth and just high growth in general is you have these like, really important moments in time that, you get something really right. Obviously the founding moment, getting that initial product market fit, like you got something right. And, from there, I think a lot of the in-between that looks like smooth and durable growth is actually just coasting on or milking, kind of that spark of like innovation or like breakthrough. And for some companies, you can coast a very long time on that.
Sure.
But for others, like, if you coast for too long and you don't kind of go and fight the good fight to like do the next hard thing, like eventually that well runs dry, right? And you see that in like either plateauing growth or just like competitive, kind of intensification, like more companies doing what you're doing. And it's like, starting to commoditize your space. Or like, I mean, as you kind of hinted at with AI, it's like, does your whole space become irrelevant? Now, maybe not overnight, is that going to impact your revenue numbers? But like if you squint and look 5 years from now, even 3 years from now, like does the old premise of our space, no code, like what does that mean when, AI is getting so smart it can build apps, right? Like agentically. And so like, I think you really do have to like, anticipate that. I mean, it's the Andy Grove quote, right? Like you have to be paranoid because the moment that you go too long without being paranoid and like coast on the easy times, I think by the time you need to like innovate and create that next spark, like it's probably too late.
Yeah. And to your comment earlier about your parents and you being proud of you pursuing your dreams, working for yourself, like why was it your dream to start a company? Like have you ever actually asked yourself that?
Yeah. I mean, it was somehow just like rooted into my psyche from pretty early on, maybe a confluence of like definitely being a nerd, like all throughout, I mean, my life, but like, especially in childhood, I definitely was like, the nerd's nerd. Right. And like, I mean, summers for me were like going and like reading sci-fi books, playing games when we first got a computer, like getting really into like just learning how to do everything I possibly could on this computer, playing games, like, and then later writing programs, using the internet. I loved exploring all the things that you could do, like, especially on the internet, right? Like I had like a little eBay store where I was like buying and selling like different trading cards, collectibles, making some profit on it. I built like a website that, maybe got like 10 hits per day on my little traffic counter and like was really proud of like the 2 cents a week that I got in AdSense revenue from that. But I just loved like tinkering and trying to understand like the technology, but then also the products and then even the businesses that could be built in this ecosystem, maybe because it was like, so it felt like something that just was so like natural to me. And like, I just loved it as a medium. And like, the idea that, wow, I could build an entire career, like I can actually make my job, like doing more of this stuff and like getting to kind of like explore and tinker more, like that was kind of cool. And I think like early on, like I learned about like either through just, I mean, at the time, like Web 1.0, there was a lot of like popular media coverage of like the hot tech companies, the Web 1.0 companies, right? I remember like watching like an interview segment with like the Excite founders and being like, oh, that's so cool. I use Excite. And like these guys, I mean, these people, they're just like in a garage, like they built this thing, like, anyone can do this, or even like reading about like, the Steve Jobs and Bill Gates story at the time, like, and this is like well in the 90s, but like hearing about like, wow, like, I think Bill Gates had just become like the richest person in the world. And it's like, wow, like, tech is not only like a possible career path, it might be like one of the best career paths, right? If you can crack the nut. So I think I just like kind of early on rationalize it as like a real thing, even though it wasn't a very obvious path if you went through like the linear like job recruiting circuit, right? I remember in college, like, and I went to Duke. I didn't study CS for a few reasons, even though I was already like fluent in programming and actually ended up taking some elective CS classes. But the irony is like, of maybe call it 30 people who graduated from CS my class year, like I think like only a small handful of them wanted to go into tech and none of them wanted to go into startups. Maybe there was like one or two actually. But like the majority of them wanted to actually do like banking or like go work for like a consulting firm, et cetera. And so it just like going and doing your own startup thing was just not at all, like there was no clear way to get there. And yet for me, it just like, it felt so obviously like the thing that I wanted to do.
That makes sense. And so after the first one, you knew you wanted to do another one.
Yeah.
You hang out at Salesforce for a year.
Yeah. A little over a year and a half.
And then you get the gang back together, or you do it with a different group of folks?
Different team. So actually like both my first company co-founder, Evan, and my two co-founders from Airtable were all college friends. So we all went to Duke. And I mean, especially since Duke was East Coast, it was very like finance and like traditional, like, job heavy. Like we were kind of the weird kids who like actually read TechCrunch back in like 07, 08, right? And we're like learning about Ruby on Rails and building web apps. And like, I mean, definitely like, like in the kind of like niche nerd camp of like being interested in all this tech stuff. And so like, I'm still very good friends with my first co-founder. He's now working on a robots company. That's actually really interesting. But yeah, like just, kind of at this time, and actually Andrew, who was Andrew and Emmett are my two co-founders of Airtable. Andrew, like I was actually roommates with during the whole first company eTax experience. And I think at various points I had tried to convince him to like join us or work with us. And he was like, I just got a sweet job at Google. This is early days, like Google PM role under Marissa Mayer. Like they just flew me around the world on this cool tour. I actually have benefits. I'm not eating burritos every day. I think
Right.
I'm gonna like learn from here for a little bit. But then the second time around, like, just the timing worked out, and like I'd always wanted to work with him. And so yeah, we were able to just, converge on the idea of Airtable.
And then the idea converges, you found the company.
Yeah.
And then how long did it take you? You said, hey, like the good and bad thing about YC is we shipped a product in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to ship this product?
So shipped to fully GA like over 2 years.
Damn.
Yeah. Which is an eerily parallel timeline to Figma, both in like the amount of time.
Eerily long.
Eerily long, but also like literally the same moment in time, like in absolute
Interesting.
date. And
Did you know Dylan then?
Yeah. I mean, we probably didn't get to know each other until like a few years into the journey for each. Actually, maybe early on, because I remember like we were both like early PLG productivity tools, doing some interesting stuff with web. And I mean, you got to realize like for the first few years of both Airtable and Figma, like we weren't like instant overnight hot successes, right? I mean, Figma like and Airtable both took a few years to like really pick up that steam. And obviously now like Figma is an incredible business. And I got to read the S1 as everybody else did, like what was it, a week ago?
Pretty amazing.
I mean, incredible, right?
Yeah.
Just like from like a product that was basically initially Photoshop in the cloud to then Sketch in the cloud. And now, like, I mean, like
It's
a real
such a
giant
monster.
of revenue. I mean,
Such
yeah,
a
like, I mean, by
monster.
all the objective financial investor metrics, like an amazing business. So,
Yeah.
but like, but I think the reason why we both spent that much time building the product is we were working on like hard problems technically at the time. Like we both had to kind of pioneer our own, kind of both like full stack, kind of development principles and like, kind of the architecture for doing real-time collab on different data models. I think we both pioneered our own front-end frameworks because like, again, like, React and like, some of the now frameworks for building rich front-end experiences did not exist. For us, like, I think what was interesting is that I knew it was like, we didn't want to go and spend 2 years in a hole just like building a product and not knowing if it would work or not, right? And so we tried to get early incremental milestones of validation. So like the first prototype of Airtable was front end only. We completely faked the back end, even though we knew we needed to do it like correctly later and do the whole real-time database engine thing. But we knew like initially, like the whole premise of this product hinges on our ability to distill app building into this really intuitive, GUI product, right? And so like if we don't get the front end, that UX right, the back end is wasted effort, right? And so let's get the front end to work. And so we built like, a front end that even that like cut a lot of corners. We wanted to get the core principles of like, you take a spreadsheet metaphor, you layer in some like database and like application building capabilities. So there's actually like data types and you can attach files and like you have, different like field types, like drop downs instead of just text. And you can do things like, link different tables together. Like you have a proper relational database setup that maybe is more akin to like a Microsoft Access FileMaker Pro, but in the web, really simple. And we like literally built that product. The first version actually, as a test, like it would persist your data into like a client-side cookie, which like, that's kind of it would be a nuts way to actually go live with the product. But for us, it allowed us to validate, can this product work? And we went and actually put it into the hands of a few friends and family to see like, would you use this? Can you figure out how to use it? And like, can you, like once you use it, like what's your, kind of workflow pattern? And I think we got enough validation from those different incremental milestones to, continue having the conviction to like invest the full 2 years into building the complete product.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah.
It's a long time to be like building.
Yeah.
Without too much real life feedback.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, especially how fast things are moving now. It's like, it's only been a few years since the ChatGPT breakout moment, right?
Right.
And like it just, it feels like 2 years is like ancient history at this point.
I mean, yeah, now investors are like, if you can't get to Series A in 2 years,
Right.
you're not moving fast enough.
Totally.
How often do you wake up with cold sweats thinking about the 20-year-old version of Howie that's like coming out of school, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, without any of the baggage that you have, like none of the family, and like you have like just raw, like they can live on ramen type thing.
Yeah.
And they have all these tools.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, I wonder like if you were to honestly handicap you again building Airtable from the ground up with the tools that you would have at your disposal now.
Yeah.
I don't know, could you do it? Could you get from 2 years to 6 months? Like, could you get, not perfect,
Probably,
but
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
could you get from 2 years to 3 months?
Yeah.
Like, could you had, how many people? 2 of you, 3 of you, 4 of you?
2 initially, then 3, and then like maybe at the time we publicly launched, like still less than 10.
Yeah, like, could you do it with just 2 of you, 4
Yeah.
of you?
Yeah.
Could you just, I'm sure you've done this, like mental gymnastics.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the short answer is absolutely we could do it much faster now. And, part of that, like, I would say, like, if I were to do it again, I could even do it much faster, even without like new like tech, right? I mean, like I said, like even pre-AI, we did have to like build our own front-end frameworks, et cetera.
Right.
Like now you would just have all that like out of the box for
Right.
free to build on. Like the hosting would be easier. There's better infra options, like, so all of that, like, yeah, for sure, there's more leverage afforded by like all the new kind of technical foundation, not to mention like, and there's actually like now, I think more recently, I'm in this, kind of chat group that has a lot of other founders debating now, like, does AI, basically augmented coding actually enhance productivity, or does it just make you feel like you're more productive because like you actually spend so much time like, using the AI, prompting the AI that like it actually, especially for smaller tasks, like is net neutral, right? Or even net negative. So I'm not convinced that like, okay, just because like you use Cursor now, like you're 10 times more productive in all cases. But I do think you could do it faster for a number of reasons if you relaunch, like if you try to rebuild Airtable today. The good news for us as Airtable is like, we're not at threat of disruption by somebody who recreates like 2015 era Airtable, because now our product has also evolved quite a bit, right? And we have like a lot more scalability, robust capabilities, et cetera, that like if you wanted to replicate everything we have, it would take you far more than like, a year, right? Or 6 months. But like I do think there's an interesting question of like, is there a complete paradigm shift? So to me, like the really interesting companies to watch are actually like the vibe coding products. So the Replits, the V0s, the Lovables, et cetera. Not because they're actually coming heads on against us for the same use cases, same customers. Like a lot of those use cases are prototyping, right? So it's like, let me build like a prototype, almost more like Framer, for a non-technical PM or designer, or even a technical engineer who like just doesn't want to spend the time building like a real version of this app or surface area. Let me just go prototype it, right? And that's pretty magical. I think there's like massive value to be created from those products for a different set of use cases than what we go after, which are more like robust business use cases. Small companies building their CRM in Airtable, bigger companies doing like, all their marketing operations in Airtable. But yet I see this convergence eventually of like that kind of agentic app building experience and like what value we provide, right? So to me, it's less about like, is our product today going to instantly, kind of be recreated by somebody else? And more like, is there a completely new way of thinking about the job to be done that somebody new who, I mean, to your point, like is probably working like, insane hours because they don't have like, a baby or like the family. And like, I mean, they can go on the ramen diet and just be all in. I think that is a real question.
That probably
I
all
ask,
of your founder friends in that group chat are talking about right now.
For sure. I mean, like, I think, the best way to make that threat, less foreign, at least, is get close to those people, right? So I've personally made it a point to like try to invest in or just get involved in, a lot of these companies, whether, it's like Varun from Windsurf is a perfect example of like this archetype, right?
Yeah.
Like so hungry. He was so young when he started the company, right? Before he was even an IDE, and just works so hard and so fast, right? And like to get close to people like that, and hopefully I can offer some wisdom from like my experience in scaling Airtable and how to think about the business. But like it's a mutual exchange too, because like I think you are the company that you keep. You kind of pick up the traits subconsciously of like the people that you spend time with and are inspired by. And like, as much as I, in a past era, like wanted to be inspired by like people who had done much larger scale companies than me, right? So I would go and like try to, spend time with like the entrepreneurial greats who
like
built
the Benioffs of the world.
Yeah, the Benioffs, the Zucks, et cetera. And like I learned a lot from getting to spend time with folks like that. But also now it's like I now have the risk of becoming like,
Right.
the incumbent
Right.
who needs to like move faster and be inspired by like
you want to be inspired by velocity.
Exactly. So like that's, I mean, honestly, like a lot of the time I spend with external companies now is these like upstarts and
companies that we're investing in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like you go talk to Harvey or some of these folks, and
Exactly.
it's like, yeah, they're moving.
Exactly.
They are moving.
Yeah, and they have this different feel to them, both as founders and as companies. Like in a way, it's like they've thrown out not just the old product model. There's this really interesting concept that actually Benchmark has been articulating recently, which is inside out instead of outside in thinking. Outside in thinking is like traditional jobs to be done. You understand a market, a segment. I think of like, vertical solution companies is very much in this vein, right? Like they're not going and pioneering like crazy breakthrough tech.
Mm-hmm.
They're just taking a known problem and solving it better than anybody else, right?
Yep.
With pretty commodity tech. And you can still build an incredible business that way, like the Service Titans, et cetera, of the world. But now like AI innovation is kind of being dominated by inside out innovation, which is where you have to actually understand the tech. You have to be at the bleeding edge of understanding every new model release, what's possible, how do you build like a product experience around that? Like, there's a know-how gap that doesn't come in like a O'Reilly book right now of like, okay, there's the raw models, but then here's how you build a amazing agentic experience like a Manus around that, right? And I think like it's that kind of inside out tech first innovation that is actually creating a lot of alpha now. And I think to think about it that way, it requires not just a different lens on product and what the product experience should be, but also like the business model and also like the operating model of the company, right? Like the way that you operate can't be on like quarterly or annual planning cycles and you do these like,
Right.
year-end reviews. I mean, by that time, like, a year is like forever in
6
AI
model
right?
releases.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, company like Cursor a year ago was like probably a sub 10 million revenue business, right? As was Windsurf. And by the way, like, I mean, both companies I really, really admire, and got to plug into at least with a small angel check, like, at around that time. But like, what I most admire is like how fast they were able to execute and have been able to execute, right? Like Windsurf, I think they came in with the IDE pivot like after Cursor, right? They were seeing Cursor really take off.
I think they're seeing Copilot really take off.
Well, that was true for sure, and that's when they built the first, like before Windsurf, there was Codium.
Yep.
Before Codium, there was their
right.
first thing, which was like
Exafunction.
the Exafunction, which was like more like inference optimization.
Yeah.
But they kind of at every point they like were really smart to leverage the pieces they had before. So it wasn't like throw this entirely away, build a completely new thing from scratch. It was like the inference optimization allowed them to build a better Copilot plugin. So they didn't have their own IDE, they just built a plugin, but they could offer better, cheaper, faster because they had more optimized inference, so they could do lower latency, lower cost Copilot basically as a plugin to other IDEs. But then I think as they saw Cursor go all in on like, let's just own the entire IDE experience, let's do a full fork of VS Code. Then I think they realized, okay, like that's clearly where the buck is. And then they also forked VS Code. And I think like from start to finish, like when they decided to fork, like I think they built the entire first version of Windsurf, like the full on IDE with like Cascade, the kind of sidebar, like, composer, agentic, like, kind of experience. Like I think they built that in like 2 months.
Yeah.
Which is insane. Like what in any larger company, like what significant product could be built from start to finish
Totally.
in 2 months?
Totally. Even your point on the like the V0s, the lovables of the world. Like I have gotten excited about, and I'm not technical. Like if there is technical and then non-technical, like I'm kind of like to the right of non-technical, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like and I just got excited about this product and this idea of a product. And I was jamming on customers with it. I wanted to see if there was a there. And I just spent a Saturday in one of these tools, just like jamming it out.
Yeah.
And I got a designer friend excited about it, and they use like the traditional design tools that ended up in like slides.
Right.
And my instinct continued to be when I was showing it to customers to just go into the actual, like the lovable where it's like interactive and I could like actually be living in it, like changing things on the fly.
Yeah.
And then I just told the designer like, hey, let's just collaborate in here. And like, it's not a product, but it's not slides either.
Exactly.
Like, it's like we're a lot closer to product than we are prototype.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more dynamic in that sense. And like, even me, like I'm, building something interactive with natural language. Like It's insane. Like
Yeah.
it is in this world. There's a lot of conversation now around like how great developers become better.
Yeah.
But like I have never felt like the like artist of a computer was always the coder.
Yeah.
And I never felt like I could hold a paintbrush in my hand
Yeah.
to be able to create a piece of art.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I really feel
Yeah.
like I have the brush in my hand
Yeah.
that I can like draw something
Yeah.
that's not like if you were to draw Picasso, like I would draw something ugly that you'd see on the side of the street. But like at least I'm still like I can still call it something.
Well, and
like,
maybe it's like you're not going to try to recreate a Picasso. You're going to build your own thing that like uniquely you value, right? I mean, like
correct. I've just never felt personally like I've ever been like had access to the same sets of tools that someone like you has had access to in the world of like computers.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I really do feel quite empowered to just in English tell them what I want to do, and it just goes and does it, and it writes the code for me on the back end. Like it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Like it really, really is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, so we like went way into the deep end at the founding of Airtable, like looking back at like the history of computing, personal computing. And it turns out, I mean, like this was like the original vision by some of the early computing pioneers like Alan Kay and like this guy JCR Licklider. Like they envisioned a world where like everybody who used computers, and everybody should use computers, could then not only use pre-built applications, but like instead actually open the hood and like build their own applications, right? Like they could actually use, I mean, software is the like the fuel that runs through like all computing devices, right? And yet like if you can actually like be a participant in creating those experiences, like you have full control over like what's possible with the computer versus, you know, if you're using a canned app, it's almost like you don't really get to like gain full leverage on the power of like software and computing in general, right? And I think that's basically what you're describing, which is most people today still haven't really been able to like participate in like the actual, you know, use of software as a medium, as opposed to these pre-built applications and devices that they've kind of like used at the surface level. And like the whole vision for no code was always about like bringing anyone closer to that medium of like, you know, in Airtable, even before agentic, like you could just go in and like use drag and drop to add, like to change the data. Like if you had a CRM and you're like, hey, here's my investment CRM. And you went to like other people you're working with and said like, hey, look, like you want to change it? Like I could just change it right here. I'll add a field. I'll like change the interface layout. Like that was one step closer towards the promised land of like anyone can just go in and like stick their hands into the computer and change how it works. I think now like having agentic experiences where like it's even more natural. You get to like talk to like a agent and it builds it for you, but you can still then inspect and see what it's built so that it's, you know, it's not like, you know, kind of opaque to you. I think that's like kind of the holy grail.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like these LLMs and what they can do is like the fullest expression of low code, no code.
It is, and yet, like I think actually you have to blend the two concepts because like one of the downsides of pure code gen with agents is that if you're not a developer, like all you can do is do visual inspection on the rendered app output to see what's going on, right? So like in the CRM example, you could go into like a, you know, one of these vibe coding products and say like, hey, like build me a CRM for my VC firm, right? And track the deals.
Yep.
And it would do it. And you could like literally look at the output HTML and say like, oh, that kind of looks right. But you wouldn't be able to inspect like the data model underneath. And maybe there's some like automations or logic workflow that says like every time I add a new portfolio company, do this thing. And it'd be really hard to actually inspect everything underneath the hood and say like, this is correct, right? And it'd be really hard also for you to go and manually try out every scenario, just manually, like in the product. And so I think that's where the no code representation that, you know, that agents can now generate as an intermediary. So you're not like generating raw code, but you're actually outputting like these no code components. Like here's, you know, a data model that you can understand because you get to see it, right, as a table and it's very easy to like interact with. But here's also the interface on top of it. And here's how the interface layout works. So you can go and directly drag and drop it, kind of like you would like a website in Squarespace or Wix. Like, you know, I think it's the best of both worlds if you can go and have the agent go and do everything, you know, through conversational input, but then still like see more than just like raw like HTML and code that like is unintelligible to a non-developer, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is like in your founder group chat today, when everyone's talking about this, if it is the best of both worlds and you're right, your business is undervalued. And if it's not the best of both worlds, then you might be in hot water.
Right. Yeah. Like,
and I think that's the core of the question that any incumbent in air quotes is wrestling with right now, which is like, okay, is what I am doing like a building block to the future that integrated tightly and appropriately will actually lead to a better outcome?
For sure.
Or am I just convincing myself of that because the alternative reality is that I then have to rebuild my entire company from scratch, which is basically untenable. Which is the story of every incumbent that has ever been disrupted before.
Well, I think if you literally have no incumbent advantages at all, like you're better off literally selling the company for whatever you can get right now and going and starting a new one from scratch, right? Just because literally you won't have all the drag from the current company business model, like expectations, even like cap table structure. Like if you start a new company from scratch, you can fully incentivize every single person there to like pursue this new thing, right? So you have to truly believe that, or else you have some incumbent advantages, or else like rationally the right thing to do is to just like sell and move on, right? And refound, like literally refound. Personally for Airtable, like I do actually really truly believe like we have the right pieces to win at this. I don't think it's guaranteed by any means. And I think we do have to radically refound the company and break a lot of the current way of working, as well as like the current way the product works, in order to win, right? Meaning, like I almost see our current, like our kind of AI native company as a parts bin that I get to pilfer from. And like, as an example, like we do have an existing distribution base. That's a valuable part, right? Like we do have these no code components. That's a valuable part. Like it would be really hard if somebody knew, like if let's say Replit wanted to create like really reliable, scalable, no code components, like this data layer that has real-time collab built in, and you can just like have AI now generate the data layer, but it's like, got this like Airtable like data IO experience, right? And then like a really nice interface layout engine, et cetera. Like all the integrations, the scalability part, like it'd be really hard to go and like build those from scratch. I mean, you could do it, but that's another part from the parts bin. But I think like the wrong approach would be to say like, okay, let's just take our existing product, our existing business, and slap some AI on top of it. And frankly, I think a lot of the really large incumbents are effectively doing that, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the enterprise SaaS space. And I think that's where it's like, well, like you can never incrementally get to the promised land. Because the promised land, like, I mean, this launch we just did a couple weeks ago was really about saying, look, like we had some AI capabilities before in Airtable. We had what we called Co-Builder, which is a one-shot way to generate a new app from scratch with AI. So you come in and say, build me that CRM, generates an app from scratch. But then it wasn't a full agent that could go and like manipulate and do anything else that you wanted on the app. Like it was a one-shot. And then we had like AI fields that could do some stuff at runtime. So you could like, generate content or like, do summaries, et cetera, on a row by row level. So for every portfolio company, summarize the current deal or whatever. So we had like I would say like the obvious AI capabilities to build. But when I look back at when I look at like the true AI native disruptors, like these kind of code gen agents, these vibe coding products from scratch, like they're taking a radically different approach, right? Which is like you come in and everything can be done conversationally. So it's not just like conversational app building at one little point in the journey. It's like, no, every single thing that previously would have required, like, well, in their cases, like writing code, and inspecting code, you can now just do conversationally, right? And so I think we had to like rethink the entire product paradigm. Like we literally changed the entire layout of our product, like the informational architecture to say like, look, like conversational is the default. And like, it's almost like ChatGPT where like, you just have this massive chat bar now. And that's the main way that you interact with Airtable. And we literally like decomposed our components into little bits and pieces that now we can inject into the chat experience so that you get these artifacts, these fragments as you're interacting with, what we call Omni, our new agent that does it all. But you could ask it data questions, you could ask it to build out a report, and it will preview like, here's that fragment that I created for you with these now like kind of disembodied no code components. And also let me show you right next to it, just like with Cursor, you have the agentic composer, and then next to that, still the IDE. Like we've kind of blended both, but we had to rethink the entire paradigm and the experience overall, and then actually like do the heavy lifting of making an agent that actually works to do everything that, literally everything that like required point and click and keyboard before, like you can now do just through like conversation.
Do you, when you hang out with the young founders
Yeah.
that are building in this space right now, do you ever think like, oh man, I don't have what they have? Like maybe I have experience
Yeah.
and I know things that they don't.
Yeah.
And I have company building kind
Yeah.
of like battle wounds, but I don't have that energy.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that?
I mean, look, I mean, I think there's definitely an energy deficit that I have compared to these like young upstarts who literally can just throw everything at their company, right? To some extent, I think when you're a first-time founder and when you don't have experience, that's what you have to do. That's what I did, right? Like I had no experience, I didn't have wisdom, I didn't have like, credibility. So all I had was sweat. And like as much sweat as I could output was like the success of the company. I do think that like with experience, you can make better decisions, right? Like, and like, I think one of the things I've learned in actually giving advice, whether it's product strategy or go-to-market strategy, so, like for some of these companies that, a common question is like PLG versus like enterprise. How do we think about that? Like, how do we think about use cases versus horizontal platform positioning? Airtable obviously have to solve a lot of that, in Sterny, right? Like we're a horizontal product, general purpose, but also we had to think about like use cases and use case marketing and templates and eventually solutions. So I think like, as I've like talked to a lot of these founders and like given them advice, I think what I've learned is like actually you can, make decisions that actually save you a lot of rework. Like maybe you would have gotten there by trial and error if you didn't have the wisdom, but like, there's some instinctive, kind of judgment calls that I think I can make differently than I would if I were 20 and like just, kind of working really, really hard, but figuring everything else out from scratch. I do think the most critical knowledge, gap that I need to make sure I never allow to exist or grow is the technical one, which is like all of the stuff that's happening in AI. There's no substitute for actually being hands-on with it and understanding how it works at a technical level, right? Like this is not something like, let's say in the SaaS world, like, there was a lot of concepts that you didn't need to technically understand, and like how integrations work. Like maybe you don't actually need to like understand literally like how an integration with this, kind of partner works at a technical level to be able to say like at a strategic level, we need to build an integration with Salesforce, right?
Yeah.
I think now the way things work technically actually is profoundly important on how you think about the product and even the business, right? And so like as an example with integrations, like if you actually understand how MCP works and what a successful MCP server implementation looks like and why that's different from like a naive one that just thinly wraps a REST API, then you actually understand like how do you build a truly different and magical product experience powered by MCP, where like in Airtable, you could actually have really smart agents pull in like intelligently just the right summary or insight from any other system out there like Salesforce, et cetera. And that kind of technical ingenuity and insight can actually shortcut you what would have been like a much heavier lift to build like a different kind of implementation, and that wouldn't actually deliver on the customer need nearly as well. So to me, it's like the bigger risk than like, not working hard enough or fast or long enough is actually to get technically obsolete or technically abstracted away from the details such that you're making decisions on a, kind of a very, very, very zoomed out or summarized understanding of like what's actually happening at the technical level.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you're talking to some of these younger founders and they ask for Howie's advice on like, hey, how do I like manage my life while I build a company? Like,
don't.
Like, how does that,
you
like,
can't.
Yeah, like, what do you say?
I mean, look, I think it's like, it is a all-out sprint in the early days. And I think until you've found product market fit, it should be an all-out sprint. It's not like a marathon, you got to pace yourself. It's like, you have a very fleeting moment of time before you either run out of funding Or, I mean, nowadays, like you can raise so much funding up front, like maybe that's not even the constraint, but it's like you run out of like patience, or your team runs out of patience, right? Like you can't go and spend 5 years finding the right product market fit. Like nobody would join your company in today's era, right? Like they would just join some other company that's already found it. So I think like it has to be an all out sprint. You have to move so fast. And like, I mean, to some extent, like, especially if you're coming in as a like relatively inexperienced founder and all you have is speed and maybe like, technical acumen, there is no balance. I think like, you just got to go all out and keep iterating until you find that product market fit. I think once you have it, then you can kind of like change into a little bit more of an endurance sport. And by the way, like, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Like, guess what? Marathons are like intense.
Right.
I've never run one, but like I did like the 400 meter and the 800 meter dash or run distance poorly at one point. And like, the longer you go, like the longer the distance, it's just like more grueling intensity of speed for an even longer stretch. So I think it is accurate to call it like it becomes more of a marathon than an all out sprint. But like that still means you're like giving it your all, and it's still like very, very intense.
Yeah. And what are the like subtle distinctions between a marathon and a sprint? Like as you live your life in a marathon, which is probably what you're doing now. Like what does that practically mean?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, interestingly, like like Olympic marathon runners like run each of the 100 meters faster than I can run 100 meters. Right. I mean, so like, first of all, like somebody moving really fast, even in the marathon mode, is still moving faster, like on a per chunk, like on an every week basis. They're probably doing more and getting like more done than like a like non-fast person, like a
an
typical
average
like
sprinter,
like and like to bring it back to like companies, like the average person at the average big company is operating like even in what they call like a sprint, like far slower than what a like high intensity startup founder or startup team is doing on a regular basis all the time, right? And so I mean, like you think about Cursor and Windsurf, it's like for the entire year span, like they've maintained an insane pace of execution intensity. So it's not just like we got to like go and sprint for 3 months to figure this out. It's like, I mean, it's been well over a year, right? Like years actually. And before they even launched the IDEs, like they were already working really hard. And so like you have to be able to maintain this like really, really intense pace of execution for like years on end. And I would say like, for me though, it's actually really fun. And like I've realized, I think there's a difference between like, the time constraints you have and the energy constraints you have, right? So meaning like, you'll never get more than 24 hours a day, right? And you need some time to sleep. And so like, there's only so many more hours you can literally work. And at some point, like you kind of start to plateau, whether that's at 8 hours, 12 hours, or 18 hours per day. But there's also energy of execution, right? Where if you're low energy and you're kind of like taking your time about like doing something, like you might just actually spend the same chunk of time doing 10 times slower work. And especially if like you're doing a lot of work that's not actually the most impactful stuff. So you're working slower, like the velocity of your literal clicks and execution is slower. But then on top of that, you're working on like the suboptimal things that are not highest impact. You're just going through activities, like I think the biggest culprit of this is like you just take a bunch of meetings for the sake of taking meetings, and everybody like has these rituals where we have weekly recurring things that we all just do, but all kind of like, in our heart of hearts is not actually the thing that's going to really move the needle. Like, why do you keep doing it, right? Like if you threw all that out and just did the right things.
Have you been able to throw it out?
I've been pretty radical in like, I've canceled all my standing one-on-ones. I've canceled most of my like previously recurring weekly meetings. And on the one-on-ones front, like, I now believe like anything important and worth talking about, like we shouldn't wait a week to talk about it. Like ping me right now and either I'll give you an instant response on Slack, or like I'll schedule like that day, like sometimes even within the hour, hey, let's get on a quick call right now. And because you're clearing out all of the standing time that was just like allocated by activity rather than topical urgency, like you can make more time last minute to get on for those things, right? Like I just imagine if you're like a 5-person startup, hustling product market fit, it's not like you have like all these recurring meetings all
Yep.
day. Like you're like at any given moment, you're jumping on whatever is the most important thing to unblock at that moment. So just in how I manage my calendar, absolutely. I kind of like blew up all of the like recurring things that are not actually like every week driving meaningful progress. I also now block out time for like actually getting hands-on with our own product. Like every week we should be dog fooding or shipping new features that like are pretty significant. And like the only way to really like get a feel for them and like, figure out like where we need to go with them is to use it yourself in addition to getting customer feedback. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And then also like trying out other companies' products, right? So like all these startups, like try to sign up for every single one. And like, I probably contribute like maybe, well in the thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars back to the like early stage AI native because I'm just willing to like upgrade immediately. They're like $200 a month. Sure. Whatever. Like I'll pay. I just like, I want to try out every single product that comes out and like really get a feel for it and understand, like, I try to squint and see the good and the potential in it, almost like an early stage investor versus dismissing it as like, oh, this is like not very good.
Yeah. Gimmicky.
Yeah.
Well, courtesy of you, all these companies' revenues are going up, and then we're paying we're playing nosebleed prices because
and I never churn too. Like I never cancel. I'm just like whatever. Like I haven't used this product for like 8 months, but like it's like I'll just keep it on the credit card. I'll go back to it. Like I want to be able to like periodically check in every once in a while and like see what's new.
It is pretty mind-blowing that you can now just like I could go and take a screenshot of Airtable's homepage and then a bunch of product screens.
Yeah.
And then basically just input that screenshot into one of these tools. And it just like goes and builds it.
For sure.
Now it's not like it. But you know what I mean? Like,
no, it's
that's
like
insane.
For sure. One thing I've done now is like, because you can build a website so trivially, like I'll sometimes create a microsite just to like express an idea, right? So like, I have like all the stuff about like vibe coding versus like no code or the fusion thereof. Like, instead of going and like writing a blog post or an ebook or something about it, like I actually vibe coded a microsite. Now I had to like go and like do some research ahead of time with like deep research, curate it, add my own thoughts. Like there's some like, kind of multi-step prompting that went into this.
Yeah.
But then I take the like context that I want to give a product like a Replit into Replit, and then I have it generate a microsite for me. And like for that, it's like profound. It's like, wow, like this perfectly shows like in a almost like a content page, where you scroll down and you just learn about like, like the concepts and there's little quotes embedded. Like it's like actually a better representation of those concepts, the ideas that I'm sharing with the team for their sake, than like a traditional internal like messaging doc, right?
Yeah.
So I just think it's really, I think what's cool is like it allows you to work more directly with a more powerful medium than what most of us had before, right? Like before you might do that in docs or slides or whatever, and now you can like actually build not only a website but like an interactive prototype of a concept, right? I think that's really, really powerful.
When founders ask you about help with like how to structure the cap table up front, like how did you learn anything from like, or things that you were like, now that I'm 10 years into Airtable, I wish I did a couple of things differently on the like foundation of the house.
Yeah. One, I think the most important thing is find the people and the structure that allows you to move with the most autonomy and agility, right? Like, so, I think there's much greater downside from creating drag potentially on decision making. Like, one example of this is like, I do think founders should try to, as much as possible, retain board control, especially in the early product market fit finding phase. Like, you got to do it yourself. Like, sure, you should surround yourself with like really smart people, and some of those could be investors, board members, but like, ultimately, like you're not going to get to product market fit by committee. And therefore, the best way to get there is to allow yourself to move as quickly as possible. So like board control, I generally think like, don't over optimize for like sensational valuation, like just optimize to get the right people as efficiently as possible that you want involved. And then more importantly, be able to get back to work. Right. And I think like, as with the big game hunting exec, kind of ego trip that we talked about before, I think there can also be an ego trip for especially first time founders with like the whole,
I want
Pony
Kleiner
show of,
on my
like,
cap table.
yeah,
or
and like
something.
I think there's like almost this like, I mean, there is this ego flattery of like you went from being like kind of a like, nobody, right? I mean, I was nobody before I started my first company, and even then, right, like to some extent. But like you suddenly have the attention of all these VCs, especially if you have a hot round. You're like, whoa, this is really cool, and I want to take all these meetings because like it's a form of flattery, right? And I think you can over optimize fundraising. You can over optimize for valuation. You can over optimize like, oh man, but I need to talk to every single possible investor and be comprehensive in my search. And I think instead, like the goal should be find somebody great. There are multiple great people to work with. Get clean terms, most of all from a structural or control standpoint, and then freaking get back to work as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, like from the ego perspective, it's like nobody was giving you attention. Now, all of these people that maybe you deem as important or something in your industry
Totally
are showering you with attention, and you're like, okay, I kind of want this to last as long as I can.
Yeah, it's like let's milk this fundraising cycle to be like 6 months instead of a 6-week, closing process, right?
Right.
I mean, for sure, like there is some of that.
And then you rationalize it with like, well, we want to get to know them for the next round.
Right. Or like, like, oh, we got to really exhaustively consider all the options and, optimize for the highest possible valuation. Like you can always come up with some justification for like spending time on the wrong things. And I think that is absolutely one of the wrong things.
Yeah. I was talking this with one of my partners internally yesterday, actually. And interestingly, how you fundraise tells you a lot about who the person that you are.
Yeah.
Like what you say, is that what you want to do?
Yeah.
Like how much information do you feel like you want to give up front? Like, especially in these days, like people are fairly maybe non-collaborative about the information that they want to share. And it turns out like they're just not that collaborative with like the, like as founders, and so like it does, I think there's actually kind of like, there's data points that you can learn just even in the fundraising process mutually.
Oh, totally. I mean, like for me, a few anti-patterns of founder style are one, like barking louder than the bite, right? I mean, like, there are some founders who come in and they just like, they talk the big game versus having a certain amount of humility and like starting first with like, here's what we actually have, right? Like when they overplay the like vision and like all the stuff that's not actually substantive, it's like all talk, right? And so I think that's one anti-pattern. I think another is like getting too aggressive with, again, the optimization of the wrong things, right? Like when, like, it's almost like it becomes this like game for, or like power play dynamic where it's like, oh, I need to like fake it till I make it. And I have to show that I have the upper hand. So like, I'm going to like make everybody kind of like, beg to get to like talk to me or work with me. And to be honest, like I unintentionally, I think I gained a reputation for a little bit of this back when I was first raising money, not because I actually wanted to play the game, but just because like ironically, I was actually just trying to like stay heads down and focus on my work and building the product. And so I would literally respond to a lot of inbound investor interest and say like, hey, like, really sorry, heads down with execution, which was true. Can we take a rain check on meeting up, especially if we're not raising a round right now? And the like weird thing that I learned from that is like, it actually made a lot of the investors want even more to like talk and get involved. And I think like there's some founders who then like play into that or like, kind of they love
like
that feeling, unattainability, right? And like if you play into that intentionally, I think that's also an anti-pattern.
Interesting. Yeah, like you're too cool for school.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. Crazy. Really crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy times.
It's crazy times. I can't wait to see what how things play out. I'm really excited. And I appreciate doing this.
Yeah, of course. This was fun.
Are you hiring?
We are, absolutely. So the interesting thing, we never stopped hiring even during the rifts because my strong philosophy is like, even if you have to radically downsize the company because like you're overweight, right? Both in terms of cost structure, but also like too many humans, even if each individually is a great person and great even at their job or a skill set, like too many people at the wrong time can be counterproductive, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my strong belief was that even if we needed to net downsize, like it would be almost like hubris to say, yeah, and like every single person that we ever need to execute from here, like we already hired all the right people. So like we never have to hire anybody new. And so I've always believed like you should always be hiring because like there's always some set of skills or behaviors that you want to bring into the company at any time. So we're always hiring. And it's my belief that that's like how you like, there's the ship of Theseus, like you gotta like, if, replace the ship floorboard by floorboard, and eventually the whole ship is different, right? And like the way you go from like maybe a traditional pre-AI company to an AI native one is you got to rebuild like kind of every single part of your, not just product and business, but like actually your organization. Now, that doesn't mean like every single person needs to be replaced, but I think it means that like culturally you have to start shifting like the whole thing towards the new way of operating. So, and bringing in like fresh new eyes is sometimes a really good way to do that.
When you hear the word grit, what do you think of?
I think of like life. Meaning like, I actually think now that it's the gritty experiences that actually make life. In physics, like equilibrium, is death, literally. Like, an organism or a colony of any living animals, like if it gets into equilibrium where like everything is calm and still, everything's like perfectly allocated, like there is no life. Life is all about like, entropy, and the fact that like, we're all just like, fighting to like, create something and do something interesting. And so I think like, to me, like grit is both the texture of experience along the way and kind of the necessary adversity that makes the journey more than just like, I love the WALL-E scene, from the movie, where like there's just all these humans that have had like all their needs satiated by perfect technology, right? They're all sitting in like these big hover chairs. They just like drink like, basically Soylent, multicolored Soylent all the time. They just watch TV all the time. And like everything theoretically is perfectly handed to them. And yet that is so not a life worth living, right? Like obviously. And so, I mean, to me, it's like the texture is what makes life. It is what makes the journey, the hero's journey, and interesting. And so like now that's hard to like sometimes appreciate when you're really in it and it's like really tough going. But I think like, when you zoom out and reflect on it, it's like, that's what made it like interesting and worthwhile.
I love that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate you doing this.
This was really fun.
That's it for now. If you liked the episode, please leave us a review or go back into the archives where we've done more than 200 episodes with some fantastic folks. This podcast is a Kleiner Perkins production, and I'm Joubin. Thanks for listening.